Uh, Welcome to the Sean and Geek, the Sean Geek and Fast Fret podcast. Done.
Well done. Okay, we're going to use that.
Welcome to the Sean Geek and Fast Rat podcast. We are doing an episode of Geeking Out with Karen B. Say hi, Karen.
Hello.
Um,
Yeah, I'm just a fly in the wall.
just a fly on the
I'm
wall.
not,
I'm just gonna.
I'm not part of the cool kids. I just hang out with them.
This is exclusively the cool kids table. Like that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
none of that.
yeah. We are the cool kids. For once, we are the cool kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, that
Yeah,
voice that you
we're-
hear, I guess we should get this person to introduce himself. Maybe explain who you
Yeah.
are, what you just did, and then we'll just
Sure.
start chatting.
Yeah. Well, hi everyone. I'm Jason Pchajek, and I am a writer from here in beautiful, sunny, and totally not rainy and wet Winnipeg, Manitoba. And last week I released, or I guess not sure when this episode's going up, but back in late September 27th to be exact, I released my debut cli-fi cyberpunk thriller novel, Bounty, through Ravenstone, which is an imprint of Turnstone Press, and got to accomplish a childhood dream in the process. So
That's
I've been like smiling constantly,
That-
like since that day. They sent me a picture, like I got a picture from McNally when they put the display up, and I was just like, oh my god.
it was really weird because Sharon approached me because I'd done one with Chadwick for his last release he'd put out, because Chadwick and I kind of go way back. So when Chadwick has a new book out, I said, well, when you get a new book out, we'll do something. He said, oh, I'm doing a book reading. So I arranged all that. So that I guess everybody remembered me from last time, I guess, or something. So they contacted me. Hey, first time author. We want to promote the shit out of it, I guess. So I said, I asked a couple of questions, and I'm like, oh, well, this sounds cool. Like first time author. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas behind the book, alternate Winnipeg, which is near and dear to me, alternate Winnipegs, because I'm a writer too, and I've designed an alternate Winnipeg. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is cool. I got to be involved. So that's why we're doing it. So I read the book. I got an advanced copy of the book. Karen has read the book as well. We both read the book. Didn't want you on until we finished the book because I didn't want to be one of those. You ever listen to those fake podcasts out there where someone feeds them guests and they're like, hey, I'll read a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
Or even just like interviews, right? There's some interviews where the interviewer knows nothing about whatever the movie or the celebrity or whatever. And it just comes off like really, really bad.
Yeah, or like you go to like a press junket and they're just kind of sitting there in front of a celebrity they know absolutely nothing about. They don't know anything about the movie, and they're just like there asking weird questions. It's like
Yes. So Sean's question, like how I got roped into this, he was like, how fast can you read? This is the question. Like, can you read a book of this many pages in this amount of time? It's like, okay, what am I reading? I mean, are we talking about like history? Is it like a textbook?
1,000-page history book, yes.
He was like, no.
Yeah.
In the future, this will be a history book. No, it's exciting. It's exciting to read. Like for me, I'm an art consumer. I'm not like Sean. I don't make stuff. I consume
You
products.
consume everything.
So, which is always fun. It's exciting that we get to meet you. How often do you get to meet the writers? Not very often. Clearly, I
We're
don't
usually
go.
very reclusive. We sit in our little cave and
Yeah.
come up with weird ideas. It's fine.
Yeah, except for Chadwick. Chadwick's always Chadwick's always on the show,
Yeah.
which is good. We got to have him back. Yeah, Karen, you should come for that one. We could talk gaming.
Sure.
Chadwick's
Oh,
designing.
wow. Yeah, for
He's
sure.
designing his own gaming system. Of course he is, because that Chadwick's just crazy. But so I have a whole bunch of things I need to know, because I'm a need to know kind of guy. But I don't know where to start. So you did answer the question of why Winnipeg, but I think I think I wanna talk about this a bit. Karen, when you saw the whole lead up in the book, when you were reading this, the world building was the thing that you brought up, and I'm really big on world building. So yeah, it's Winnipeg. Sure, it's Winnipeg, and it's where you grew up, that sort of thing. You answered that stuff already, but can you kind of walk through the process of, okay, Winnipeg is my backdrop. Now I'm going to build an alternate history around that. How did that come about?
Well, it goes back to the original ideas that kind of percolated when I came up with this original idea, and like the original idea sparked because of basically a song that I had heard, and I got this like crazy idea in my head about like bounty hunters chasing people in a city, and I was like, my mind started rolling, and I was like, I gotta like do something with this. And I decided, okay, I'm going to set it in Winnipeg. I'm going to do all these things. And I knew I wanted to set it in the future. And one of my first thoughts was, okay, I'm a sociologically minded person. I have a master's in sociology. And I was, in the thick of, well, I guess, near the end of my undergrad and going into grad school at the time. And I was thinking, okay, what if nothing changes? And it's very fitting that we're doing this recording on election night. When things might significantly change for our province. But I thought of, if nothing changed about Canadian society, if we continued on the path that we have been on for, I'm going to say optimistically, since the 70s and 80s, with this whole push towards very neoliberal economic policies and relying on the free market and business and corporations to solve a lot of the problems that we're facing, getting private clinics to start taking healthcare patients, and private schools to start teaching our kids, and bringing in privatized energy production, things like that, where we're relying on the free market to solve a lot of our problems. I thought, okay, in the far future, like 100 years in the future, what could all of these outcomes look like? And I settled on this world where, in a very cyberpunk way, corporations own absolutely everything. Everything is run, and there's a line in the book where, Argo basically is the government, and every service that the government hands out and does for people is filtered through a subsidiary of this big Canadian mega corporation. So that's kind of where I settled on that. And then when the idea to actually build what the city would look like, I consume so much science fiction content. I almost exclusively read science fiction and fantasy. I've been on a really long fantasy kick for the last like 2 years. But science fiction is a huge part of, the media that I consume and the books that I've read. And I always see, the big towers that touch the sky. You think of like Altered Carbon, where it goes so far up, like people are looking out to the clouds. And I thought, what would be kind of different is, what if we, instead of going up, we went down and used the space that was available to us and just kind of built these subterranean cities, still like with open access to the air and everything, but building deeper down into the ground. And then that was really the idea that I had. And then you fast forward to when I'm starting to work with Turnstone, and the idea to kind of pivot the genre from a very traditional cyberpunk story to take advantage of this emerging genre of climate fiction. How would that specific piece impact how a city is constructed and the rationale behind why a city might be built vertically as opposed to horizontally? Like right now, we're seeing this across Canada. We're not looking towards population density and building density with housing. Everyone wants their big suburban lot that's half an acre, and you've got all this grass that you need to cut and trees you need to take care of. So we're expanding horizontally and further out from the city center. Yeah, and it has a very, it's a rationale that really fits with the reason why a lot of particularly European cities are moving towards even more population density and urban density. The way that Madrid and Paris and London are all kind of redeveloping the way that they're constructed and their housing is constructed to fit more people into a smaller area to reduce the need for to preserve all of this land outside of these cities to build green space, to plant trees and have farmland, and to utilize, one of the crazy stats is like there should be no problem for building housing in the United Kingdom because of like only about 10% of the usable land is covered by anything. And you think of this tiny little island where everyone thinks like, oh, they must be like falling over each other. No, it's actually, there's a lot of area you can cover there. So it does have that kind of rationale that feeds into what we're already seeing and already experiencing. That I think for people today, and that's kind of obviously this really the point of science fiction, is to point at the world of today, wrap it in this fantastical shell so you can make a commentary about the way things are and the way things are going.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So this is roughly 100 years in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the 21. Well, the year is 2120 in the book. So, yeah, and I one of the things that was brought up and has been brought up by a couple people is the fact that like hockey still exists.
Oh yeah.
And I like in a very like Manitoba way, I had to bring up the fact that hockey exists in this book.
Yeah, that was great. Actually, because I'm like, oh yeah, he's a hockey guy, right? And I'm like, oh, there's a lot of hockey references. I'm like, okay. Yep. But it's like it makes sense. Like we're such a hockey town. It doesn't matter what the hell's going on in the world. We're still going to have hockey in our town. There's no way it's going away.
The guy, you get out, you get home after a long day of work, and you still have the game recorded because it's a rivalry match.
That was good. See, that's one of those touchstones I was talking about. Like, even though it's in the future, it's still now. Like, there's so many things that are now. So how long? So I think you mentioned you started writing this in 2017 or something.
Yeah. So the initial idea kind of came to me in 2016. I did a little bit of like writing, but it wasn't until 2017 where I like buckled down and said, all right, at some point in my life, I'm going to have to write a book and actually finish it. I'm going to take this idea and run with it. So 2017 is when I wrote the first draft, and it took me about a year and change to write it. And then, the iterations that led up to signing the deal with Turnstone at the end of 2020 and working over the next couple of years to develop and redevelop the story. Because when you change genres, like not a lot of, the narrative largely stayed consistent. But the genre and some of the elements to the world really, I wanted to do this at the time was really start to change things. And when that genre switch happened, I used it as an excuse to just like go at this and take all of the ideas that the genre shift gave me.
So not Cli-Fi originally, right?
No, it was very much a traditional cyberpunk critiquing socioeconomics of the modern day and corporations and things like that. and kind of that evolution and the concept really didn't have to change all that much when I switched over to Cli-Fi, because I found in exploring that genre that like they're basically like this. They're very much enmeshed with one another, and I think moving forward it's going to become, those two genres are going to blend together, because you can't exactly talk about the future without considering the climate and the way that our planet is going.
That's such a cool like point of view. I have a question. Did you always were you always writing something? Did you write like short stories? Did you start from there, or
like for this particular one, or just like in general?
or just like in general? Just like because one of my favorite parts is like the world building. I told Sean like the thing I like the most is like the world building. But I think I was most impressed with how you wrote the world building part, if that makes sense. Almost reminds me of like The Hobbit or something, where it's like laying down the foundations, and like as you follow the main character, the descriptions are just so like kind of perfect. It's not telling you that, oh, there's a rock, beside the rock there's a tree. It's not that like literal, but it's like, I don't know, it's
gives
just
you
like
the information
flows
you
kind of
need
naturally. So were you always writing something, or was this kind of your first?
This is my first, like this book was my first time sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to take something from start to finish. Like I've been writing stuff on and off since I was like 7 years old. I was that kid. I've talked about it before, but we still don't have internet at my family cottage. So, I would go to the cottage and we'd go there, and my dad would commute back to the city because it was only like an hour drive for him to get back to work. And we would stay out there for weeks at a time. And I would go from being in the city with the internet and the video games to being somewhere with no TV, no internet, no friends anywhere. It's just me and my siblings and my thoughts. And you either go insane or you find something to do. And my thing to do was to read. And eventually I just thought, hey, maybe I should do this. And maybe, I've got ideas that are popping into my head every once in a while. So I would scribble things down, filling up notebooks with ideas and different things, and using any excuse that I had in school to, whenever there was the option to write a short story or something, I would take that and be like, all right, this is the one time I'm actually going to do my assignment because I want to do it. And so I was just like always writing stuff and coming up with ideas, and that hasn't finished. Like my phone is, the notes app on my phone is filled with ideas. And it was just in that period, I was in the middle of finishing, my honors thesis and getting ready for like my undergrad to come to an end. And I had a little bit of extra time, and I thought, I might as well, keep this train going. I've been writing stuff constantly since I started university, so might as well write something for me. And that's how that came about. And that whole process now has resulted in it being like, I'm always writing something. I've always got some idea that I'm working on. I've already written the sequel. I'm working on the third book while I'm writing a fantasy novel. Like it doesn't stop.
So you have multiple books at various stages. Okay, I don't feel alone then.
Yes. Yeah.
I've got. I wrote a book in. I don't know. That always tell you how old I am. But I wrote my first book a long time ago, and then I wrote another book, and then after that, then I started just ping ponging between, working on a couple books at a time, and I've got all these works that I'll edit that later. So all these, and then there's a choice at some point, like this is the one I'm going to carry it forward. So you're in that same situation where no, this is the idea. you might have written 10,000 words with one idea, but it's like, no, that's not the one to carry forward. Is that kind of the general idea?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, kind of. And, I've got half finished like chapters of things here and there. And, I after I wrote the first draft of Bounty, when I was going through the whole editing process, I started toying around with working on the sequel, and I had this like weird thought of like, okay, I don't want to put the energy into this if like nobody's ever going to read it and it's not going to get published. Like, why would I start writing the sequel? So I just went and I wrote a horror novel in like a few months. I just like there was a thought that I had about this particular concept that I had for this world, and this guy that's like isolated at this like church in the middle of the woods, and he's the groundskeeper at this church, and he's alone, and what happens to him. And I wound up writing this whole novel, and it's just sitting on my computer, and I have no idea what to do with it. So it's just like all of those different ideas. And I think to go back to the conversation about how things were written in terms of like how the world building was constructed and actually written, I think it's hard because it's a bit of a chicken and the egg situation where, while I was writing the original draft of Bounty, I was working in sports writing. I was a sports reporter and then became sports editor at the Manitoban, which is the U of M student newspaper. And I was writing these breakdowns and stories about, the games that had happened. And, I grew up playing hockey, and I was covering the women's hockey team at the time. And I was just describing the play as I saw it as a former player. And it was very descriptive and like very snappy, because like just the way that for some reason, the way that I wrote it, and that bled into the way that Bounty was written.
Okay, let's go with that. So, because I was going to ask this later anyway, but
yeah.
So the description of the action sequences, that's your hockey writing there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, I would say, very kinetic. It's very, it's very action focused and movement focused. It's a lot about the way that I would read the play in hockey and understand how the play would develop in hockey is just based on like an intuitive understanding of how bodies move in a space and how physics operates within confined spaces, and having to be aware of how bodies are shifting and moving in time with one another in 3 dimensions. And it kind of evolved into this style of writing action where I kind of write it as thinking of the reader's eye in the scene as a cinema camera. And if the viewer were there, if the person reading the book was actually in this moment, what would be the important things for them to be seeing, and how would they need to be positioned to be able to see it properly? So when characters are moving around in a space, like where would the camera be positioned to catch what's going on? And even like little motions here and there, the quick cut to someone's hand moving or something shifting in the background. Those little
I did like that because like there's certain books where the book's great, you're going along, the action scene comes, and it's he punched him back, he got knocked out. Like it's literally like no description. But then everything that came before, the character interactions, the conversations, like, and then you hit a point where it's like, oh, he threw a right punch. Like but I like that you actually, because for me, like the fight scene in any book, there's a choreography to it. And it's the same thing in movies on how that director decides to shoot that scene. There's always the complaint of, there's Daredevil season 1, like the fight in the hallway that everybody talks about. Like they spent a lot of time making sure we saw what happened and we felt what happened. But then you get other movies, maybe the Bourne movies a little bit, where it's just jump cuts and you don't know what the hell's going on. Like that's not that's not
and the Bourne movies, like those fights are incredibly well choreographed. If they had just like locked off the camera and let the actors go, they have
use a wide shot or something. Like sometimes there was these close-ups and it's like, but I want to see what these guys are doing,
Yeah. You don't need the quick jump cuts to make it feel faster and frenetic. The action itself, when I was writing, particularly when I was writing the action scenes, I always went back to, and I think this movie came out at the perfect time, but think about John Wick and how those fight scenes were choreographed and how they were represented to the viewer in as much detail as possible. And all of the fights where there's no flash and flare, like they're very flashy fights, but they're fighting in a way that's so natural, where it feels like these are trained combatants that are trying to down each other in the fastest way possible. There's not going to be some like dancey, nothing against Bruce Lee, but there's not going to be like this dancey, flashy, Bruce Lee fighting. You're going to try and put the guy down as fast as possible. So what are the processes that you need to go through to make that happen? And that's kind of what I was thinking when I was writing those fight scenes.
But
and I always
took us with the main character, because whatever the main character is seeing, we're seeing, right? Like I think there was like towards like the end, like the big battle scenes, there were like pages where it's like there's no dialogue, but I'm loving it because you're just describing it. You're describing every single thing, and it's painting a picture. Which I was telling Sean, like, I think I'm missing some visuals, because like I'm always curious if I'm imagining the same scene as the writer, if I'm reading a book, right? Because sometimes there's like no pictures, unless it's a graphic novel, then you know exactly what they're talking about. But like, I'm always like curious, but also I like that because it's open to whatever I can imagine, know?
And like, I'll be perfectly honest, there is no, like, my way of viewing the scenes is not inherently the correct way of viewing the scene. If you see it differently and view it differently in your mind, that is just as correct as the way that I have related, because you are the person that's interpreting what is in front of you, and you are like, we're telling the story together, because I'm laying down the tracks and you are the one that's making the engine move forward. So I just try and make it easier for people to get it. And I think, I was thinking when you said that, like, there's pages and pages of no dialogue, I was like, because I was really worried about writing dialogue. Like,
wait, was that something you're struggling with?
Like,
was the dialogue thing?
It was, I don't know if it was me struggling with it. It was me just not feeling confident in my ability to write it. It was one of those things where, like, world building, great, I can do that in my sleep. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I was a very imaginative kid. And, doing the action scenes, perfect. Like, that's totally up my alley. Like, I was the kid that consumed, the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and those were the best parts of those movies for me, because I got to see these things unfolding, these like long scenes of no dialogue where you're just engrossed in it. But dialogue was one thing where I was always like, is this coming off corny? Is it not as like snappy as I think it is? Is it boring? Do the characters feel flat and lifeless? And that was one of the things that I worked on super hard, is being more confident in the dialogue and writing the dialogue, because it was something that for years I had been worried about. And I think I don't exactly know what the specific moment was, but I think there were a couple scenes that jump out to me, one of which is not in the final book at all, but I still think it's one of the best scenes, like, emotionally. Is there was like a full-blown multi-page argument between Nikos and Maria that that was in an earlier draft. It's the scene where they go to on their
Yes.
date
To the restaurant?
to meet the
Right. Yeah, okay.
Zhaos. Yeah. They left the place and they were a little tipsy and wound up standing on a rooftop just screaming at each other because they were arguing over something that had been percolating throughout the story. And I sat there and I'm sad that it's gone, but I also I like how that chapter progresses and the snippet that I took of that argument and put somewhere else. I think it's way more effective where it
Okay,
is.
so it moves to the
Um,
point where she's discovering that he hasn't been frank with the AI thing.
yeah, and he's been, you know, she is very, and it was much more the divide for them was much more along the the whole point was that Maria was worried she'd lost everything. She'd left and she left under very onerous circumstances. The last thing that she remembers from some of her friends was an argument in the bar, and she's off fighting in Africa. She comes back and is super worried about oh, did I just burn all my bridges? Do my friends now hate me?
Mhm.
And she comes back and realizes that one of her best friends has basically been hanging around with the enemy and is going to take the only life that she knows away from her. And she just wants him to admit that he's done it. And they have this long argument about it. And it gets very personal. And that was one scene where I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do this dialogue thing pretty well. And the other, it's really funny, but my girlfriend's not a reader, at all. She she loves world building. She's writing a D&D got a setting guide right now, and she's homebrewed this entire world with religion and lore and structures and everything, but doesn't like to read books. So we're reading it together, basically a chapter a night, and we were reading the basically chapter 3, and the scene where it's just Nikos and Odin talking at the table at breakfast. And that whole scene, she's giggling beside me because, the dialogue is going along and all the funny beats that I was trying to put in there, those were hitting. And I was like, okay, I did it. The book is out there. It's on shelves. I've signed copies. It's out there. And okay, I did do the dialogue correctly.
Oh. Speaking of which, I got to get mine signed, so we're gonna have to meet up at some point because I got to get this thing signed. I did want to talk about. So you've got this idea, you've decided to pursue it. I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. This is the one. This is the one I feel can connect with an audience. This is the idea that
Mm-hmm.
I can really stand behind. You start doing the writing process, that whole thing. At that point where you're like, okay, I got to find an agent or a publisher, or were you worried about that at that point? Or was that something like, I'll worry about that later? And then as well, how does that happen? Because just from a guy who's been writing his entire life and I'm not signed to anything, I've had stuff published, but I've done it on my own. How does that whole thing work? I think our listeners are like, okay, he's a first time author. How the fuck did that happen? I think we want to know the nitty gritty. How does that actually work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, when I went into it and writing the book, I was very non-committal on actually trying. I knew I wanted to get it published, and I knew that it was going to be probably a pretty long journey. There's so many people. I know tons of would-be authors, people who are trying, and there's countless. Every year, thousands of people try and get a book published, and only a few hundred actually succeed. So I knew that it was going to be a tough journey. So I think a lot of people get stuck in the mind, the frame of, okay, I need to do something that could get published and get published traditionally. So they kind of like do market research to figure out like what popular stories are and what works and what doesn't work. And they construct a story to fit the market, which is, I think, the complete wrong way to go about
that
it.
ain't right at all.
It's
Mhm.
if you're one of those weird like grifters online that's trying to sell a course on how to like be successful, like sure, like go for trying to tell people to do that. Like don't do that, you suck. But I think what people need to understand, and what I felt at the time, was I want to write a story that I enjoy. I'm a science fiction fan. I love cyberpunk. I love stories like this. So I'm just going to write the story that I want to write, that I enjoy writing, and there's going to be an audience for it. Somebody will find it, somebody will enjoy it, and there will be somebody who's willing to take a chance on it. So I wrote it, and then I got to the point where I was like, all right, now I got to find an agent or find a publisher. And it took a long time because, genre fiction is a tricky market to get into. And a lot of agents will tell you this, when you're going through the query process. For those who are wanting to get into this, there's really two routes you have. You either have to find publishers who will take submissions from unagented writers, or you have to find an agent who will take you on and will go to the publishers who will take agented writers, because publishers use agents as kind of like a filter mechanism. The agents vet the product and the person, and then they bring them an idea that they think is marketable and something that can sell. And I struggled to find an agent that would take a chance on the story that I had. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go direct to some publishers. And I went to a bunch of different publishers around the world, some big, some small. And I was kind of thinking like, all right, I don't know if this idea is going to work. And I was ready to I wasn't ready to fully scrap it, but I was ready to let a different project
just go self-publish or something,
Yeah, something like that. And then I got, contacted by Turnstone. They said hey, we're interested in this idea that you have here. And they went through their process of, their discussions on how they take on. They're a small indie publisher. They only publish a few books a year. And they took it away and talked about it and said, hey, we think there's something here, and we want to help you get to that idea and that finished product. And it was kind of like the exact thing that I needed. And it was, I think, to me, such a vote of confidence from them. And I think and it's part of their ethos with, building Canadian voices and particularly Manitoba literature, that they will take on somebody and be like, all right, we're going to work with you to help you grow as a writer. By the end of this process, we want you to be a better writer and be more confident in the work that you do. We don't know, well, they do care how long it takes, but they know that it's going to take a while. So they knew that there was an idea there, and there was something to this. There was a glimmer of something in the idea that was undeniable. And we worked very hard, myself and my editor, Melissa, to draw out what exactly that was. And, quick pivot in genre and some revamped world building. And suddenly we find this narrative that, by the end of it, I was like, I look back at that original concept and that original draft, and I'm like, I think it pales so far in comparison to what the final product is that I never could have seen it any other way. It is so much better. And, that was my journey. And the one thing, and the thing that Jameis told me, when, I agreed that agreed to Turnstone's offer was, that nobody tells you how long the process is and how much work it is. We as consumers of stories and of literature, we see the final product and we see the end of the marketing journey. We don't see the years that go into it and the ideas that are and the drafts that are written and thrown out and the ideas that are changed. Not everybody is Stephen King or Greg Patterson or all of those crime writers that have a team of ghostwriters behind them so they can publish 3 books a year. My mom loves John Grisham, but I don't know how many of his books are actually John Grisham writing them. For the average writer, it's going to be 2-3 years of hard work and waiting and thinking. And by the end of it, I was like, I was, on one hand, I was tired and I was like, I just want this thing to come out, like, can it be done? But also I was like, even up to the end, we were toying with ideas of like, how do we tweak? There's something about this that I want to change.
It's not quite working. You gotta find
Yeah. That's for anybody who's
I was just gonna say that's the process that I'm most fascinated with, because like I'm on the 9th edit of my current book, which I want to bring forward. Like I think it's good enough. My wife and I have talked about it. Is like out of everything I've written, like this is the one that can connect, right? So, but I'm on the 9th edit, and Karen and I bring this up on the show all the time. The 9th edit is so important because we look at movies, we look at cinema, we look at like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff like that, and how they've had some misfires lately, and their execution is like they're rushing the product out instead of no, you need to sit with it, you need to massage it out, you need to put a little bit of gloss on it. If it ain't ready, you can't put it out. You got to go back to the drawing board, and you got to polish this part, you got to fix that thing. So we've started calling it the 9th edit, which, you can't just, there's a sense of like, if you had done your statistics and okay, this is hot, this is good, this is this type of character, and done like that paint by numbers thing and put it out, because right now in this next 3 to 5 years, this is really hot. You really got to get this out. And if you did that, you'd rush the product out. It's hitting all the points it needs to hit, but it's not your story. And I think,
and it comes off as inauthentic, and that's why a lot of the movies that are coming out now flop. It's not because under the underlying like the animators or the actors did a bad job. It's the story. It's
superhero burnout, and it's like no, it's just a bunch of shitty movies came out. That
right?
Yeah, it's like I am about 60 hours into Baldur's Gate 3, and I just started Act 3, and it's a video game that came out from a smaller studio that is everything that every gamer has been wanting for forever, but the businesses and the publishers said that it wouldn't work. This is big sprawling RPG with all of these options and no DLC and no day one patch and no microtransactions and all of these things, the things that make people money. They said it wouldn't work, and then it comes out, it smashes all kinds of records, and there's millions of people playing it every day because it's what we wanted, and it was what the game studio wanted to put out. And I think of like Cyberpunk 2077 just had their 2.0 update, and that's the game that CD Projekt Red wanted to put out, but the studio just didn't give them the time to make
seriously?
it.
Okay, because I've heard about the game, and then all the flop of the game. So the new version is actually worthwhile.
They wanted to delay it another year.
Oh yeah, you can't do that. We have to make money here. Come on.
To fix. Yeah, exactly. They wanted to fix all the bugs, iron out everything, and add in a bunch of content that was missing. And the publisher basically said, no, you have to put it out now because you need to come out by Christmas because our earnings call is right after that. And we need to make sure that this comes out and meets all these targets. And we're now 3 years after 2-3 years after launch and the 2.0 update comes out with the DLC and all of the things people wanted in there are now in there, and the game is in like a perfectly polished state. It's like, yeah, you just give them time to make
So
the
if
thing
they
want to
had
make,
if they had
and
taken
it'll
that
be
extra
amazing.
year that they wanted to do, and it got released,
It probably
Yeah.
would have been more like this.
Mhm.
damn it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like that's why you don't want to write a story just to fit a market niche or to fit
Mhm.
the needs of where the trends are right now. That's how we got 7,000 YA novels that are
Mhm.
exactly the same,
Yeah.
because everyone was trying to write the next Harry Potter or the next
Mhm.
Mhm.
I don't know the other YA,
But even
the
like
Percy
Harry Potter
Jackson.
kind of fell into the pressure of, she has to release a book by
It's
this
amazing.
time or
The books
whatever. And
got
yeah, the
bad
quality the
after.
quality is different, right? Like the quality
Yeah.
clearly dropped at some point after she was forced to kind of release, and people give George R. R. Martin like crap for not finishing his books, but I'm like, if he's not ready, it's not ready. Like if all he has is 2 chapters, that's all it is. Like,
Yeah.
he's
If
not
we never
happy
see
with
the
what
end
he
of
has.
it, like that's fine, because
Mhm.
if it was forced out, that wouldn't have
Have you
been
read
George's vision.
Have you read Patrick
Exactly.
Rothfuss?
No.
Yeah.
Name of the Wind.
Now he's
I'm not done. I've only
okay.
read
So
like 2.
this book, I'm sorry, I'm nerding out here. It happens. This is called Geeking Out with Karen B. I just happen to be here. But when I read that book, like that was the book where I read like, holy shit, this is what happens when you put the book out when it's actually done. And then I read the second book and it's equally as good. And I'm like, holy shit. It is possibly in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, possibly the best thing that's been written since Lord of the Rings. Possibly. It is that great. Like every single word matters. There's a paragraph, and they're not putting in filler words. They're not using filler adjectives. Every single word matters, and it flows like poetry almost. It is that well written. And his third book isn't out.
That's exactly
What's
how
that?
I feel about. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about the first Law trilogy from Joe Abercrombie. There were, these are like 500-600 page books, and there were scenes and things that happened where I was like, why is this happening? Why are we talking about this character? Like, why did they make a specific mention about this random dead body next to a tree? And then you get to the third book and everything starts to reveal itself, and you're like, oh, he's had this plan since the beginning, and now it's coming to fruition, and his vision has been able to stretch across these 3 books.
Is it a trilogy and it's done?
It's just like, yeah. So it's that story arc is done, but the universe continues on. There's a few standalone books in the middle, and then there is a second trilogy after, which I'm on.
Sorry, I missed the. I'm writing it down. I missed the author's name. Who was it? Sorry. Joe Abercrombie.
Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah,
Abercrombie
gotcha.
and Fitch. So it's the first Law trilogy, and then there's the World of the First Law, which is the heroes.
Okay, I'm gonna look this
up. Red Country, and then there's the one. It's my favorite of all of the novels, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's being turned into a Netflix kind of series.
Okay, so your homework In the Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. The people are getting on his case because his third book's not out yet. But I think he had written the first book. I'm making assumptions here. I think he'd written the first book, had written most of the second book, and then his first book gets put out. So there's not as long of a wait for the second book to come out because he's already started, right? So now there's no third book, and people are like, oh my God, he's lazy. I saw him on a live stream and he was playing video games. Like, what the hell does he think he's doing? It's like, he's letting things marinate. He's getting the creative juices going. Let him put the book out when it's ready.
They're also allowed to do other things.
Yeah, like come on, man.
Like, don't get on George R. R. Martin's case because he made $1 bajillion and he wants to work on a video game. He wants to create Elden Ring. let him do it.
Right.
That's the thing. There's an impatience that, it's one person writing that book. It's not like you said, John Grisham. There's a team of 20 people writing this book. No, he's writing the book. If you want the vision unmarred and the way it needs to come out, like, let's give these people some time, or don't read anything until the whole trilogy's done, or quadrilogy, or whatever.
Yeah.
Just let it be what it is. Let it allow that ninth edit, like the infamous ninth edit we keep talking about. Like,
yeah, and like for like full on context, like I was looking back at this now, and the editorial process for me went through 7 rounds of revisions. There were 7 different drafts. Then you throw in the 2 drafts that I wrote before then.
There we go.
So it's 9, and then there's about 3 or 4 drafts of copy edits, and that took a really long time, but it's much better for it, because I went through a process, and there was a draft that was over 500 pages long, and it was way too long, and I had to rip a bunch of stuff out. But there are chapters from that 500-page draft and like concepts from it that still are in the book today. And there are full chapters that I have saved on a document that I'm going to use in the future. They're still canon to the world. They happened
off screen.
I'm just using them later. Yeah.
When you finished all your edits, the final edit, did you have that feeling of like, this is it? Like, I'm done? And you had that like feeling of satisfaction?
Or were you like, oh shit, what are they going to find now?
Yes. Yeah.
A little bit of that. When editorial finished, the funny thing was I was at the lake, and I had sent off the draft and went to the lake, and I was at my girlfriend's cottage out in the Whiteshell, and thankfully there's internet out there. So I got the email and it's like, yeah, we're gonna move on to copy edits, and I was like,
for real?
wait, it's done? Like, for real? We're moving on? Moving on to the next stage? Cool. And then when copy edits were done and we started getting to the proofs, I was like, the day that I first saw the proofs, and with the everything laid out, and I got to see that grungy like title text for the first time, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is real right now. And that's when it started to feel like, oh, this
you're
is
talking about like the chapter headers, like that
thing.
text you're talking about, and then the bounty text.
Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, this is a thing now. It's got an identity. It's got a visual flair to it. It's that was a surprise from Jameis. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Oh wait, that's my book.
He just like said,
was there moments like, wait, that's my book?
It's like, wait. Yeah, I had to like sit there. I was like, huh, that's gonna have my name on it. It's the words that I wrote.
You guys want to give me credit for this?
It's the opening line that I came up with.
What about
cool.
the cover here? So what's the process there? Did you have input into this? Did you say, this is what I want? Like, how does it, like, did you seek out someone yourself, or did Ravenstone do it? Like how does that work?
So that was a pretty hands-off process. I'm not a very like artsy person. Like, I don't like, I had ideas.
Yeah, that is art, my friend.
Not visual art, or paintings and drawings and stuff. So I had kind of ideas of what I wanted it to look like and kind of the feel for it. And Turnstone went away, and they did some searching and found an artist, and basically Jameis turned over like 30 cover mocks to me, and with like a bunch of different art and different imagery. And that was the one that we kept coming back to, because it, to me, really captured the claustrophobia and like heat and like the crush of the city. It's dark and red, but it's got like the angle, so there feels like there's a movement to the image, and it's very like hemmed in and dark, and it got that feeling across very, very well. And we kind of just like, I saw it, I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's the cover, that's got to be it. Like that feels so right to me. And we did some small changes, and to the text, and adding the little robot guy in there, and it just kind of fell the way that it was. It was
were there
a
other thoughts of
situation.
having the main character there, or maybe like the group, like kind of the 3 or the 4 instead, or?
Yeah, there were. I had a bunch of different ideas of like sequences. I'm very much obsessed with when you have a trilogy or a series where all of the books visually fit together. So I really had loved this idea of like a sequence where there's book 1, it's this chase that's going on, and book 2, it's these people crashing through like the middle pane, like the plane of the book separating the top and the bottom, and the third one is them falling down to like into that bottom pane. And it was an idea that I had, and then through all of the different mocks and the ideas, that one kind of just settled in. And the thought was like, the robot was a fairly late addition to the cover, but I think it really, like the moment I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's the cover. Like, just don't touch it, don't change anything. That's it. We got to go with that. There were times where I was like, oh, do we want to do the the heroes standing on top of the building, or like the face or the crew standing together, but like that to me felt a little bit too conventional and too like movie poster, or like modern movie poster, not when movie posters were cool. So I wanted something that was very different, and that's kind of what came out.
I like it because I didn't know what the cover looked like until I was actually at McNally, and I'm like, oh, it's the robot. And then I'm looking at it and going, well, if I saw this, if I hadn't got a preview copy and I saw this on the shelf, I'm like, I'll go, pick it up, read the back. Like it's got enough striking, like visually speaking, it's got enough to bring in. Yeah.
I like the color. It just,
but it doesn't look like other stuff on the shelf. Like the choice of the colors actually, it makes you look, and the fact that it bleeds. Sorry, I should show here. It kind of bleeds over.
Yeah.
Most books, it's like, okay, there's an image on the front. You flip it. There's this.
I gotta actually on that. I gotta shout out my girlfriend. She's much more visually art minded than me. That was her idea. Was to arrange the images in a way that like there was this follow through.
It's a great freaking idea
between the two. So if you literally did what Sean did, and you take the book and you fold it out, you can see there's a continuity.
It makes you want to flip it and go to the back, and then you're like, it's almost like, I don't even know if I'm gonna read the back. I'm just gonna pick this up. It's just like there's enough visually to but also the kinetic style matches like the action sequences and stuff. So there's a continuity there too. It's not just here's a picture and here's the book and they're kind of the same, but not really. Like there's a flow there, which is good, because I don't know how many times I've seen a really good, flashy, awesome cover on a book and then read the book, go, oh, that's not really the same, is it?
Yeah.
And it happens all the time, right?
Always.
There's some book readers that just take the book by the cover.
I do all the time. Right? That's how I used to pick music, back in the day when you'd go out and buy a cassette or CD. Like, okay, I don't know who these guys are, but I'm picking this up because that cover's awesome.
Yeah, like there's some books on like my bookshelf where I look at the cover and it's so boring. Like it's just as bland. There's one book, there's a book called Intercepts by TJ Payne, and it's this amazing horror story. and it really like it's the kind of story that gets under your skin and you feel it. But it's the cover is so simple. It is literally just a white cover, red text with like kind of a ghostly image of a person behind like fogged glass, and it doesn't really give you an insight into what the book is about. But when you read the book, it's phenomenal. And then the First Law trilogy, the editions that I have are basically just maps of like
Mhm.
different colors, and they're really boring, kind of standard, like just text on the front, text on the back. Each book is a slightly different shade. There's like tan, blue, red to tell you that there's like
Okay.
progress. But then you look at the standalone novels, which are maps of the regions where the stories are taking place, so you can see all the locations that the characters are going to go to, and they're all stylized and really beautiful, and they really get across, like they get an idea across in your head. Specifically, The Heroes, which is a war novel, and the locations and the battlefield itself is super important to the progress of the story, and you just understand like, oh, these are the things that I'm going to see, these are the places they're going to go.
Karen, do you get any other questions? I know this is running, well, typical you and me length, but
Yeah.
you get anything else you want to ask?
Well, I was gonna ask because I'm not sure if this was asked, like in the on the book release, like what is your, I guess, source of like inspiration? Oh my goodness, my cat is trying to take over here. Um, like with regards to like what inspires you, whether it's a
Mhm.
major source of inspiration, like either it's a movie, a show, or a book, or
Yeah. Weirdly, I get a lot of inspiration from music. I'm like I'm constantly listening to things, like whether it's podcasts and you know music tracks. One of the things that we do with our Dungeons and Dragons characters is we create character playlists that
cool.
like that add to moments of character development and story, and like give little hints of things that we as like a group can make together and consume this thing together. I think for this book in particular, um, there was a cover of Iran.
Okay.
The
Flux Seagulls?
Yeah,
Okay.
there was a kind of a movie trailer cover of that song that I heard just like one day. I just like had a playlist on YouTube, and the song came up, and I was like, oh, this is a great song. And that's where like this idea started to percolate about the kind of the initial concept. And then for the book itself, I was really inspired by the kind of the usual suspects when it comes to science fiction and things like that. You Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the whole Blade Runner idea.
Hmm.
And you have Neuromancer by William Gibson, which was also a pretty big inspiration, particularly from a technology perspective and a story perspective. But really, what helped so much, and I mentioned it earlier, is John Wick. Like,
Yeah.
Hmm.
you know, sure, Blade Runner gets me in, and Neuromancer get me into the world and the genre, the music gets me into the mood. But it was John Wick that got me into like the action and the feel and the way things are going, the snappiness of the narrative moving forward, and the actual like action progressing, and then the way that scenes kind of played out in the choreography. Those were really the big inspirations. And then from a scientific perspective, a lot of it is from my own academic background.
Right,
You know,
right.
you know,
Are you the type of
studying.
person that reads or like dabbles into everything fiction, or do you kind of stick to a certain type?
I look fairly broadly when it comes to fiction. I do stay kind of in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror genres, but I'm not opposed to like other things that come up. Those are just like those make up the lion's share of my bookshelf and my recommendations. And there's a lot of like variation within that. And we would talk. I keep shouting out Joe Abercrombie, but each book in that run of books he has, they're all like different genres. There's a Western, there's like a Saving Private Ryan war story, there's a Kill Bill revenge thriller, all in this, like, wrapped up in this fantasy sphere. But I think a lot of the big stuff comes from reading nonfiction. That's one thing that I picked up in university and never really stopped, was expanding my intellectual and academic horizons. I don't get to do it as much anymore with my day job now, but making sure that I'm well read and I'm staying up to date in terms of what's going on in the world and what's going on, listening to a lot of current affairs podcasts and things like that, and staying up to date with our society and the world around us, politics, technology, economics, and being well versed in when you're writing kind of cyberpunk climate fiction stuff. All of that is so important to writing those stories and relaying that narrative so importantly. You can't really write cyberpunk without understanding modern economics and the way that our modern political system works and our modern economic systems work, because the real biting commentary comes from people who understand that stuff.
Well,
and
someone will call you out if you didn't do your research, right?
Exactly. So
I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there just writing like aimlessly and whatnot, which is also fine. But I like the idea of, either mirroring what's happening or being kind of a commentary to that, or just, knowing what's happening now, then you can write some sort of like escape from it if you want to, write to that, to that crowd. But yeah, again, like timingly, it's the election. Like the last time we had an election, the turnout wasn't very good, and a lot of people, their reasoning is like, well, I don't want to learn about this. I don't know anyone, and that's just like it. You can't know everything in the world, right? I'm not a sociology expert, so it's nice to know bits and pieces of that through reading materials and whatever, right? So it's nice. Like, I like your perspective. I like asking these questions because, like, again, I don't produce art. I really can't. I can come up with, notepads of stuff, but I cannot. So
I mean,
it's really fascinating.
the big thing is like the first one's the hardest. It gets easier after that. You write one and it gets so much easier because you've done it already. But I think I brought it up in the book launch, and it's the concept of public sociology, and it's a school of thought in the discipline where it's kind of a rejection of the standard kind of academia side of everything. The idea is that the real value of the work that we do as sociologists and the way that we see the world and the way that we're able to connect all of these disparate parts of the way our culture and society and all of it functions, to distill it down to those personal stories, is the value comes from teaching people and enlightening people about the world around them and the way that their society functions and the way that their society impacts them. We shouldn't write for other academics. Like, well, it's important to write journal articles and all of that. Writing for an academic audience and writing something that's going to impress your peers is infinitely less important than writing a book that's going to be read by Joe everybody who lives in Swan River, Manitoba, and it's going to change his life and change his outlook on something. It's like back in the day, how the work of Karl Marx became so incredibly important for the moment in history because it came out at the right time, and he wrote it at a level where there were people that could understand it.
Mhm.
Some of the greatest nonfiction works that exist right now. I think of Homo Deus by Yuval Harari. It's a very impactful story about humanity and kind of the post-human world that we live in, and it's written in a way that like anybody can read it. Like my dad, who's not like, he'll tell you he's not the most academically minded person. He's a smart guy. He runs his own business and he has a degree in economics, but he's not like big on history and things like that. And he can pick it up and be like, oh, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
And books like stuff by Malcolm Gladwell, like he writes in a way that gets ideas across to people in a very simplified but understandable, nuanced way that I think is really
And sometimes
important.
that's all it takes, right?
Mhm.
Like, you might reach someone out there who's not interested in this specific topic, and this is their window to that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I hope this can be, is a window into some of these concepts and ideas that are real and we're experiencing right now, and
Mhm.
maybe start some conversations.
That actually is, you got me thinking. So the local band Weaker Thans, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but they're huge. They're a big Winnipeg export. And when I listen to them, as a musician myself, I listen to them. I'm listening to what the guitar player's doing, what the drummer's doing, how the singer is vocalizing, and I'm hearing all these things. And then I started listening to a podcast that breaks down their catalog and breaks down the songs, and I'm listening to them. Okay, so here they're talking about the socioeconomic burden on and then I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
He's just, when I listened to the song, I heard a guy breaking up with his girlfriend, and he regrets the things he's done that led. But a great song
Mm-hmm.
can have all these layers to it, and any great art can have all these layers to it.
Mm-hmm.
And even picking up, it's a guy that broke up with his girlfriend, which, you have a relationship in the book. And if some people read your book and all they see was the relationship between these two characters, or his brother, his brotherhood, with the bounty hunters, and that's all they get out of it, that's okay.
Which is fine, yeah.
But if they read it again, they already know what happens, and they read the book a second time, they're like, hang on, what's this thing about? Okay, they mentioned this other country here, and they're not building downward, they're building. What's that like? So a great piece of work has to have those layers, but if you're writing honestly something, all your own experiences are going to come out. So your background, socioeconomic, like all that sort of stuff. That stuff's gonna, if you're writing honestly, that stuff is going to be in there whether you plan it or not, because that's just
It's
the
just
way you
naturally,
think.
it's just going to come out naturally.
Yeah.
But
I can't write anything else.
But it's honest. But if you're trying to do the formula thing, it ain't going to work. Like when
it's going to come out forced, right? Like it's not going to be authentic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the album that my brother and I put out, our Dome album. Like when we released that, there's the people that would come to shows, oh yeah, rock and roll and all this. And then there's, we'd have someone come up after a show and they would say, that particular song, like I really identified with that because I feel alone too. But then the other guy's like, yeah, metal or what. But, like when we did that album, it was that same thing. It's like, here's all these layers. Enjoy whichever layer appeals to you the most, but but it was honest, right? And but it has all those aspects. Like, I don't know where I'm going with that, but
yeah, it comes down to that idea of write what you know, and that's how those things come about. Is that earnest understanding of where you are, what you know, what you feel confident with, the experiences that you have, those will all come out whether you want to or not. I can't look at a piece of art the same way that I did when I was 19, before I had really enmeshed myself in the field of study that I wound up doing almost a decade in. And I can't look at things the same way. Like, I look at Star Wars in a completely different way now, with the undertones of like colonialism that are in it, like inherent in it, or very explicit in some ways in it. So everyone's going to, when they're writing something, they're going to come at it from a different perspective in their own way. And anybody who's consuming that content will as well. You talked about like pulling the layers out. Like, that's what I hope, is that like people are going to start peeling back and thinking about those things as they're reading, and start to maybe question some of the things that they're thinking about, or the things that they haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, we can go on.
In summary, we liked it.
Yeah, in summary, yeah, we liked it.
It wasn't clear.
Because
we get all the way to the end, it's like, it kind of was.
Yeah, I was hesitant because when she reached out to me, like, oh shit, what if this sucks? Because I have a problem. Well, it's not a problem. I like a lot of things. I find enjoyment in a lot of things, and there's things that I love, and there's things that I like, and there's certain people that haven't been on the show that I've asked to be on the show, and it's like, I can't lie. So, it's like, so when they ask me to do it, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then if it sucks, then I'm going to have to be really good at deflecting, I guess. But I didn't have to. Like, I'm a slow reader in general. Like, I usually takes me about a couple of months to read a book, because I take my time with things. I'm reading the layers as I go, but I consume this one very quick. Because I'm
a eager reader. I think I got the copy and I read, like, I blew through the first half, because I think, like, I was telling Sean, like, the intro really got me, like how everything was laid out, and like, never mind, I like the theme I was in, and like, I just had a busy week, but like it was very easy to get into. I was really worried not knowing what the topic was, what the book was about. Like, Sean was just like, "How fast can you read? We're reading this, blah blah." And I was like, "Okay, I hope it's something that I could get to," because sometimes you follow. I'm sure you follow an author, or a director, an actor, or something, and sometimes they put out something that's like okay, right?
Yeah.
So, I was like, I just want to get through this so that, when we talk to you, I actually just want to read it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it was great, because a lot of people have, like, friends and family have said, like, oh yeah, I want to read it. I'm like, oh, well, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And then, I I gave a copy to my mom, because, she and my dad wanted one, and wanted one for my grandma. And I gave it to my mom because I got the copies kind of the week before, and I gave it to my mom, the copy to my mom, on the Friday. And she works in healthcare, so she was working 12-hour shifts, and 14-hour shifts more like, over the weekend. So she started reading on Monday, and by the time she got to the launch, she was already like 3/4 of the way through the book.
Nice.
And she just like had torn through it. Like, didn't matter how tired she was. And I was like, oh, did you like it? And she's like, oh yeah, I'm loving it.
Excellent.
Yeah, all those things that you thought were pointless when I was watching them as a kid, they're not so pointless now, are they?
So your mom doesn't have like any like sci-fi interest or fantasy, or
no? She's very much, yeah, she's very much like the kind of crime fiction stuff, like the Patterson Grisham type stuff. My dad, there's
kind of like little bits and nuggets of that in there that I could see her glomming onto.
She and my dad have started to like really branch out with like different things nowadays, but they're still not like super into it. Like, my dad will literally watch whatever when I was living at home with them, like I would throw something on the TV and he'd just like sit there and watch it with me. It didn't matter if he knew what was going on or not. He'd just like watch it with me.
Nice.
That's kind of nice.
So, yeah. So they're both enjoying it, and so my very not science fiction inclined mom is enjoying it. So
Excellent.
It's a win.
yeah.
Well, that's good. Okay, well, we'll cap it off here. I think this is a good point to leave off. So where do we find your stuff? Are you on X? Are you on Facebook? Are you on where do people reach out to offer their commentary on your book?
Yeah. Well, I'm on. I'm just gonna call it Twitter. I'm not gonna call it X. I'm on Twitter.
I tried to push really hard to say X.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's just my name at Jason Pchajek. You can follow me there. You can also same handle on Instagram, and then as well on TikTok. I'm a little bit more active on TikTok. I do 1-minute book reviews there. So if you're following, you can
nice.
follow along with my reading interests. And
I was
stuff
worried
that
you were
like
going to
to
say
like.
1 minute dances or something.
No, I cannot.
I was like, oh, what a change! What a
my
pivot here.
my sister's an award-winning dancer, so I let her have that. I'm not. She had that skill as a child. But you can follow me there. Go to my website, and if you're interested in picking up the book,
Where's the website though? Where's the website?
It is jasonpajackwriting.com.
Okay, gotcha.
Or .ca. I think it's .ca. I don't even know my own URL anymore.
Oh.
You just Google my name, and it's
the link will be in the show notes for sure.
Yeah,
I'll make sure I find the right location. Well, this was great. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, I guess that's it. So I guess we'll sign off. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. And bye. Have a good day.
Hey gang, Sean Geek here.
And Fast Fret.
And we have 2 storefronts. If you are a TeePublic fan, you can browse our inventory over at TeePublic, which is teepublic.com/Sean Geek Podcast.
Or redbubble.com/people/Sean Geek Podcast.
You can get anything from either storefront, from t-shirts, stickers, phone cases, accessories of all kinds. We're talking masks, notebooks, mugs, pillows, totes, tapestries.
Oh my.
Everything's there. Just go to those addresses. Also check the show notes and help support the show. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.